Good afternoon, and thanks for coming and joining us. Hi, Joan. I'm Chere, Justo with the Montana Preservation Alliance. I'm the executive director, and I'm here today with my very good friend Cyndy Andrus, who's the VP for marketing from the Bozeman CVB, and she's also, for the last 8 months, a Bozeman City Commissioner. So she wears some different hats, and she's been involved in tourism and been on the Tourism Advisory Council. She also has a family business every fall, goes back to Minnesota State Fair and runs a food booth with her family for fun and her family reunion. So she's kind of been around the tourism realm in many different ways for a long time, and we go back forever, so it's fun to do this with her together again. I welcome you to this discussion about heritage tourism. We're going to talk about a few different things, and we're also showing movies, so we think you're going to enjoy it. And I'm going to start Cyndy's video, and then she'll talk afterwards. Good.
I just want to say before we get this video going that I was fortunate enough to attend the U.S. Cultural and Heritage Tourism Summit in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, and it's where I first saw this video. It was given to me by Jonathan Turtellow, who is the Senior Chief Editor for National Geographic Traveler, and it takes a very poignant look at the choices that we make in our communities, in our country, the good things that we see and the not so good things we see. And I want you to think about this in terms of what you're presenting to the visitor when they come to your community, and the choices that you have to make and how you portray and tell your story.
The past year, I have made a journey across this country. I was quite amazed by what I saw. I had never imagined it would be like this. This is the legacy we have created. This is the image of our home we present to the world. I think of future generations and their feelings encountering scenes like this. This is what many places in the country look like. These views, these scenes, these are the memories I will carry with me forever. It has been a profound experience traveling here. It has made me look at my land in new ways. My expectations have met the reality of this country, a reality hard to describe, extraordinary to experience, impossible to forget. I can only wonder, will this ever change? The choice is ours. The past year, I have made a journey across this country. I was quite amazed by what I saw. I had never imagined it would be like this. This is the legacy we have created. This is the image of our home we present to the world. I think of future generations and their feelings encountering scenes like this. This is what many places in the country look like. These views, these scenes, these are the memories I will carry with me forever. It has been a profound experience traveling here. It has made me look at my land in new ways. My expectations have met the reality of this country. A reality hard to describe, extraordinary to experience, impossible to forget. I can only wonder, will this ever change? The choice is ours.
So pretty interesting video. Anybody have any comments, thoughts, provoke any ideas? Ellie? Anything? Yeah, if I know your name, it's let's see here. Let me find my, where am I looking here? Oh.
Yeah, that is a pretty significant.
Sure, I need a little help.
Where did you see that originally?
I saw that when I went to the Cultural and Heritage Summit in Washington, D.C. This was a couple of years ago, and I really thought, at the time that I saw it, it really struck a chord with me. And I learned a lot at that conference about cultural and heritage tourism, and I was able to bring some of that back and talk about it at a governor's conference on tourism, and really have decided that geotourism, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today, I'm going to talk to you about heritage and cultural tourism, but I'm going to talk to you about it in the context of geotourism. Anybody out there heard that before, the word geotourism? And this woman here in the second, sorry, I don't know your name, but do you have can you tell me what you think it is, what your idea of that is?
Well, at its core basis, it's really about preserving a sense of place. It's about taking all of the things about it, geographically meaning not just its landscape, but its culture and its architectural components and its arts and everything that makes it what it is, and preserving them and enhancing them and using them to create that quality of life for the residents and for people who come to visit.
Right, very good. It's this whole idea of it's an experience. And I'd like you to think about heritage tourism not anymore as a silo, not as something that it is in and of itself, but as a part of an experience that somebody gets when they visit your community. I want you to think about, what is the story that your community has to tell? What makes visiting Missoula different than visiting Bozeman? What gives it a sense of place? The sense of place is that you know where you are. You plunk me down in the middle of somewhere and I can tell you where I am. Because if I don't know where I am, then I'm just in some generic area, right? So really think about those kinds of things as I go through this presentation. I'm going to talk to you about a study that was done with the Smithsonian Magazine and the U.S. Travel Association. This was done a few years back now, and they looked at who really makes up this cultural and heritage traveler. And I'm going to refer to that as CHT because cultural and heritage tourism and travel is a big mouthful and I fumble on it. So when I started looking at this presentation and doing some research, I came across this slide that showed all these different kinds of tourism. There's everything: adventure tourism, birth tourism, dark tourism, ghetto tourism, grief tourism, medical tourism, sports tourism, weather tourism, volunteer, all these different kinds of things. And it just really re-emphasized my whole idea of why geotourism is so important, why it's important in Montana, because we have a lot of things that the geotourist wants. And if you segment yourself, this is what you're up against. This is the definition of geotourism, and she pretty much nailed it right on the head. Tourism that sustains or enhances the geographical character of the place being visited, its environment, culture, aesthetics, heritage, and the well-being of its residents. And those last few words are what really separate this kind of tourism from anything else. And it really has heritage and culture at its core. Because if you get the people of your community to embrace the kinds of tourism that you have going on there, you're going to be much more successful. And the way that you do that is by having them interact with the visitor. And these geotourists, they are interested in understanding your community. They want to eat local food. They want to visit the local hardware store. They want to know what makes your community tick. And in the end, they're going to be there longer, they're going to spend more money, and they're going to come back, and they're going to tell all of their friends about this great experience that they had. So this is the geotourist is the tourist that the state of Montana is now really wrapped its arm around. It's what our 3 brand pillars support. It's the kind of, our brand really accentuates geotourism and attracts these kinds of people that come to our state. So I'm going to tell you, as I mentioned, give you some statistics about the cultural and heritage tourist. And this information was given to me by Dr. Suzanne Cook, who is the data diva, if you will, of the U.S. Travel Association. And she's been studying, she studies a lot of things, but she's been studying cultural and heritage tourism for quite a long time. And what she found out is that a significant majority of U.S. travelers have at least a toe, if not more, in this cultural and tourism heritage arena. One of the things that's really important to this group of people is authenticity. And travel to authentic places is an integral part of the geo-traveler lifestyle. About 81% of all travelers in this country said that they had taken at least one trip in the past year that had at least one of 15 different types of cultural activities involved. Now, it might not have been their primary motivator, but they did include such an activity, and that's about 118 million people. And I'm going to give you guys, just in case I forgot to mention this, but I'm going to kind of give you this view from the 10,000-foot arena, and Chere's going to hone it down to more Main Street. But I think it's important that you understand this from a huge, big, wide perspective and why this is an important arena in tourism when it comes to the whole country, why it's important in Montana, and why it's important in your community. So here is a breakdown of the activities that this group really enjoys doing, and the most popular being performing arts. They like to visit art museums, festivals, and fairs. They enjoy ethnic cuisine. 58% of this tourist included one or more historical type of activity in their travels. Now, if we look specifically at all the types of trips American takes, and then see what share of those are include a historic element, it's about 14%. So 14% of all domestic travel has a piece of it that is related to CHT. That's about 161 million person trips. And if you break those down, you can see that 61% of them enjoy visiting historic places and museums. They enjoy performing arts, cultural events, etc. So what are the characteristics of these particular kinds of people? They tend to be a high-yield visitor. And high yield means that they spend longer time in the duration that they're visiting. They spend 4.5 to 5 nights in a place that they're visiting, as opposed to about 3 nights that the overall traveler, the general traveler, might spend. They have a greater use of air travel. They have a greater use of hotels. They do a lot of activities, and they also spend more money. The spending level of these travelers is about 59% higher than travelers in general. So they are important visitors to you, and we are seeing more people that are marketing their destinations to these kinds of travelers. And what's really important here is that they're not marketing to get more and more people. They are marketing to get travelers that make important economic contributions to their community, but they also bring with them these attitudes that are willing and they're interested in protecting and preserving the destination that they're visiting. These travelers are also interested in other activities, which leaves a lot of room for partnering with the private sector. For example, 46% of them also love shopping. And there's a really interesting intersection between cultural activities and shopping. They go together. In fact, the shopping number of the CHT is higher than among all other travelers combined. And you can see that the other kinds of things that they like to do is, sightseeing, they like outdoor recreation, national parks, all those different things that are listed here. Overseas visitors are also a part of this group. These are figures and activities from the overseas visitor, and you can see that many of these visitors are very involved in looking at our historic and cultural sites here in the United States. So what are some trends? Why is this important? Why should we be thinking about this? How is it going to be affecting us in the future? And why will it continue to grow? I'm going to list a few things here that are pretty obvious to you, but if you think about them in terms of cultural and heritage tourism marketing, you might spur on a few ideas. First, we're going to talk about the aging population. Statistics for the U.S. over the next 20 years see a huge gain in the segment of the population, which are the baby boomers, those of us from 60 going into our 70s. This is a huge shift in our population. And also what you don't see very dramatically on this slide, but you see a very large group starting to move in, which are these millennials. And these are the kids and teenagers and young adults of today. Some say this may be a larger group than the baby boomers, depending on how you define them. But this group is very different, and we will have to learn, and we are learning how to communicate with them in a very different way than we have with the baby boomer generation. They have Blackberries, they have iPods, they get their information, they want it quickly, they want it now. They're not as likely to sit down and read a National Geographic magazine. So we need to think about how we're delivering our message to them and how they're going to take it all in. This aging phenomenon is a major catalyst for increases in the kinds of travel and tourism that we are looking at here. Cultural and ethnic diversity, another trend that we see affecting this market. We've had a tremendous growth in various parts of the population, so that the white segment of the population has declined over the last couple of years from about 72 to 69%. We have also seen a growth in many segments of the population, particularly in the Hispanic population, that has grown from about 8 to 13% just over the last decade. So if you play that out over the next 40 years, you'll see a steady growth of other segments of our population. And this is important because the result of what is going on here means that you will have many new markets for the kinds of cultural and heritage projects that you have, which will be very appealing to certain segments of the population. Geographic trends. These are the growth areas. And as you can see, the West is still growing more than any other part of the country. Now, we're not just talking about the mountain states. You have to combine here some of the western places that this graph has categorized. But the West is growing almost more significantly than any other part of the country, as well as the Southeast. And part of this is because of immigration, of course. The point here is that certain areas will naturally do better than other areas because of population growth. Now, we all know that travelers within the U.S. tend to travel within 300 to 500 miles of home. So if you have a cultural and heritage tourism attraction within those growth areas, you should be doing pretty well. And finally, there is this whole idea of reprioritization of values. And as we think back, 9/11 really was credited with what was at the time a short-term, but I believe now a long-term shift in people saying today, what's really important in my life? Trying to rebalance work with personal lives. And what they found is that while 9/11 may have accelerated some trends that were already underway, and that's what they were picking up in this geotourism study. So here again is the definition of geotourism. And some of the thought behind this study was that they thought there was a huge part of the population that was really motivated by positive attitudes and about the environment and culture and heritage, but they really didn't know. So that's what the study was trying to get at. And this is what they found. Of the top 6 categories, the top 3 really identified the geotourists. So I'm talking here about the geosavvies, the urban sophisticates, and the good citizens. And this group of people equates to about 58 million people that are very positively oriented to this kind of travel. These people are traveling for a sense of place, and they care about how well the places they are visiting are taken care of, and in the end, they even want to help. And that's why they come back, and that's why they get involved. These are American adults, like you and I. The next 3 are the ones that may be in the market in the future. They are either too young to fully appreciate what's going on and to be engaged, or they're just not sophisticated enough. But they had attitudes that appeared on the study that mean that in the future they could be more interested in the cultural and heritage products that we have to offer. And finally, increasing international travel and tourism, both to and from the United States, is another stimulant for this kind of travel. When international travelers come to the United States, they want to see what's uniquely American. What makes this place unique, authentic, and reflective of its sense of place? This is what the international visitor wants, and I will bet that this is what most of you want when you travel as well. So as I alluded to a little earlier, if you don't have a sense of place, this is what you have. You have the threat of generica. And as Barry Petrogoff, who's the researcher in Florida for their Department of Tourism, very succinctly put it, generica is the homogenization of the landscape through commercialization. If the destination begins to look like the origin, the visitor has every right to ask, why go? Why would I want to leave my home and visit something that looks just like it? And in a nutshell, for me, that's what the study was about, and that's what my little portion of this program is about. How do you build a sense of place and a tourism, so to speak, that fights this kind of situation of generica that's really not good for anybody? So I'll leave you with a question. Are we sustaining or enhancing the character of our place? What are you doing in your community to tell your story? What are you doing in your community to enhance your sense of place? And I'm now going to turn it over to Chere, and she's got all the answers.
Okay, I'm switching the video, so it'll be a quick pause here. I hope.
Cyndy, what was the apathy?
Oh, that's the group that I call the ego tourist. They're the ones that are more interested in themselves, really, than they are about where they're going or what they're doing. Those are just, those last three show indicators of perhaps someday becoming a real good geotourist, but they just didn't show up high enough on the study that they were anybody that we would be concentrating on right now. And if you look at some of our marketing plans for the regions and the CBBs and even the state, those top three are really where we focus, and we really drill down on the demographics of those, the psychographics of those people. What is it that they want to see? What is it that they want to do when they come here? Does that answer your question? We'll take some more questions at the end, too. So,
Yeah, we were hoping to hold some time out for that.
waiting.
San Luis, Colorado sits 200 miles southwest of Denver in the shadow of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It's the oldest town in Colorado, settled by Hispanic colonists in 1851. It's also one of the poorest. There are few jobs. Many get by on subsistence-level farming. In 1987, a network story featuring one of the Christmas traditions in the valley summed up the bleak outlook.
We can see the town dying in front of our eyes, and that's sad. You can see it on Main Street. The storefronts are boarded up. The sidewalks are in shambles. And the people, I think, realize that now. I think that when they see their grandchildren having to go, and the young couples that are leaving, then it really strikes home.
Now, 5.5 years later, a transformation is underway in San Luis. Main Street has gotten a facelift. Distinctive murals adorn large walls that once were blank. There have been many new businesses, including a visitor center, 2 new restaurants, art galleries, and perhaps most important of all, a new attitude of optimism. This town of 850 residents welcomed 80,000 visitors in 1993, thanks in large part to the vision of this man, Father Patrick Valdez. Father Pat, as he's known, came to San Luis as pastor in 1985. He was struck by the town's economic poverty and its richness of talent.
It had been isolated for so many years that a lot of the traditions, histories, the art had been preserved. Things like furniture making, weaving, the making of tapestries, as well as particular type of foods had been preserved in this community.
Father Pat was convinced that there was a market for the artwork and crafts. His belief helped encourage residents, 80% of whom are Hispanic Catholics, to pursue a strategy of cultural tourism involving local artists. Many residents credit one project with turning their town around: the Stations of the Cross. 2/3 life-size bronze sculptures are placed along a trail to the top of the mesa and the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Media coverage of the project was extensive. Dedication ceremonies in 1989 drew 10,000 people. The sculptor commissioned to do the work was from the area. Herbert Maestas says that the arts are simply part of their Hispanic tradition.
People make things here. It's just part of our culture to make our own things, our own objects. They're done the way they were made hundreds of years ago. They're still doing it that way now. You know, some of these craft items that they make today, and they are beautiful.
The community funded the project itself. Each $5,000 sculpture was purchased by current and former residents, both individuals and families. Volunteers put in long hours clearing brush and building the trail.
We just felt that if anything was going to happen, that we were going to have to do it ourselves.
Felix Romero runs the R&R Market, a business started 130 years ago by his great-great-grandfather. He was part of a core group which eventually became the Castilla County Economic Development Council, a private nonprofit organization. Their objective was to help San Luis develop an economic base so it could become self-sufficient. They held a series of public meetings.
It's just a group of people just saying, we've had it, you know, we're tired of sitting around complaining and waiting for, you know, the state to come down and help us.
The group began to develop authentic complementary attractions that gave San Luis a distinct image in a crowded tourism market.
Our first success was the visitor center. We took an old building and we remodeled it, and then we had a place for people to stop and talk about the things that we were doing. And I think people needed to have something that they could see and touch physically. And they began to believe that maybe something could happen or something was happening.
An abandoned school was remodeled with federal money and has a new life as the San Luis Cultural Center. Visitors can study the area's early history in a museum, browse an art gallery featuring the work of local and regional artists, and enjoy various arts performances in the theater. Annual events such as this Harvest Festival also draw tourists and give the town added exposure. An old convent now houses an artist cooperative where local craftspeople can sell their weaving, jewelry, pottery, quilts, and blankets. A consultant brought in by the Economic Development Council is teaching the artists how to market and run small businesses. Upstairs is a bed and breakfast furnished in an authentic regional style. The building's careful restoration cost more than a new building would have, but Father Pat felt it was more important to preserve the old structure.
I think it's a matter of having to live with ourselves. If it's not real, forget it. We won't do it.
Private ownership of the surrounding mountains precludes developing recreation-based attractions. Nonetheless, the scenic beauty is an important part of the San Luis environment. Visitors also seem to appreciate the unspoiled nature of the town and the friendliness of the people.
The people are so welcoming. It's just a wonderful place to stop and visit.
The stations of the cross are fantastic.
I can sort of lose myself here and just forget everything else for a while anyway. It's a lovely place to be. That's a place to rest and to get some kind of feeling about yourself and where you belong in a setting like this.
Town leaders have enjoyed remarkable success in attracting funding and other support from state, federal, and corporate sources. Like U.S. West, whose low-interest loans helped pay for downtown beautification.
The most marvelous thing about it are the people and the spirit of the people here. They decided that they were going to pull themselves up, that San Luis was really going to be on the map, and that they would find economic strength here based on indigenous qualities. And we thought it was very important to support that. We believe that rural America is very important. If rural America is strong, then our business will be strong as well as the rest of the country.
The town's location, just an hour north of Taos, makes it a natural stopover or day trip.
I know it's a bit bed and breakfast in town. I have a couple of husband and 2 children.
After 5 years in the tourism business, San Luis is just now starting to see some visitors who use it as a base to explore the area. By comparing themselves to other tourist destinations in the area, the people of San Luis are formulating a vision of what they want and don't want to become.
What we want to have happen here is that the people here are the people that benefit from the development and whatever evolves in San Luis.
I want San Luis to maintain its community, its sense of community. I don't want it to grow too big.
The history, the surroundings, the culture, the religiosity, and these are our strong points, and these are our selling points. And I think we have to continue to develop these.
Leaders are also looking beyond tourism to create jobs. Projects include a woodworking factory, a foundry, organic farming, and choke cherry production.
Our community is definitely getting more beautiful. All kinds of new things going up. But there also has been a definite improvement and change in the attitude, the personality, the community. It's an attitude of optimism, it's an attitude of raising up of people's self-esteem, of a community's self-esteem.
You see a life to the town again. And we're seeing people come to visit, and they like to stay. And I think the feeling they get here makes them want to come back.
Has anybody here been to San Luis, Colorado? Yay. It's on my list. Well, I have to tell a story that I was at another conference and a gentleman from Utah had this video. And so as soon as I saw it, I thought, I really want to get a hold of that. So I contacted him, and the video was made in the early 1990s, and so it's not available readily anymore. And he got back to me and said, well, he'd loaned his last copy out, and he hadn't gotten back yet, and I wanted to have it for this conference. And so then I contacted San Luis, Colorado Tourism, and they hadn't remembered there even was a video like this. And so that was a surprise to them. So I went ahead and contacted the state Colorado Preservation Organization, because they do a lot of heritage tourism, and when they got my inquiry, they asked everybody in the office, and nobody had ever heard of it. But they happened to move their office, and like right around the time I was inquiring, and they moved into the new place, and they were opening a box, and here was the old video on a VHS cassette labeled San Luis, Colorado Tourism, and they said, oh, I think this might be it. And so I got it transferred to DVD and stuff. I only got it like 3 days ago, and after trying for 2 months. So it is a really sweet video, and my intention, right at the end, to tie it together with what Cyndy did was to just talk a little bit about how we know that there are these audiences out there. We know that there is potential to do business through tourism and to encourage people to come and visit and support our local economies. And we know that there are all kinds of statistics that would infer that this would be a healthy thing to do. So Cyndy really set the stage for kind of that bigger picture of the traveling American public, the traveling international public. And my hope is to just share a few ideas about what you might go home and do in your own communities, and just take some ideas away that could be useful in the future. So heritage tourism, cultural tourism, geotourism, they have so much overlap that you can almost talk about them interchangeably. I'm just going to talk about heritage tourism and leave the nuances of how you can split the pie to someone else. This definition, similar to Cyndy's for geotourism, is that Heritage tourism is traveling to experience places and activities that authentically represent the stories of people of the past and the present. And you know, that word authenticity is really probably the core message of what heritage tourism is all about. It's for people who want to travel to a place and see and experience the real place. They want to know the real people. They want to eat at the local cafe, stay at the old hotel or the B&B or the place that isn't just a chain like every other one out there on the interstate. This is a place where you get a unique experience because it's about authentic people and the ways that they have lived in this area for a long time and will continue. So sense of place, authenticity, that's what the heritage tourism experience promises to the visitor. So what are some of the benefits? Well, I think the video was a really nice reflection of some of the things that can ensue if a community engages in heritage tourism. First, there's the economic benefit, and that is the thing that's often used to sell this kind of approach because it needs to not only make sense from a heritage perspective, but also from the perspective of benefiting the community as a whole. So how do those economic benefits manifest? Well, new jobs, opportunities for new businesses, increased tax revenue, diversified local economy, local ownership, all of those things that can strengthen a community's economic outlook and can revitalize a community. And of course, we're here talking about main streets, we're talking about downtowns. These things all come to roost downtown, and for most of the towns that we deal with, and really primarily all across the nation, these are historic downtowns. The core of your community is generally your historic area that was first settled and where commerce began. The other side of it is quality of life benefit, and of course that's why I'm doing this, because it's about community pride and it's about preserving the unique character of any given place, and it's about preserving each community's unique character. Cyndy was talking earlier about why people would go somewhere. My idea is, why would people preserve it? And it's because it's not only about what it looks like and how it functions, it's about who we are. It's about who we are as people, how our parents, grandparents, or maybe just us first generation people have become attached to places, and they mean something to us, and it's where we raise our children, and it's where we live and work, and these are the places that we care about. And if you want to talk about that sort of investment and connection to your community, I think sometimes people talk about the NIMBY movement and, NIMBY, don't do that in my backyard. Well, I was in Acoma Pueblo in the spring, and Acoma Pueblo is the oldest community in North America. Perhaps Taos Pueblo is a rival to that, but they're consecutively occupied communities ever since 1350. And the people there are striving to keep not only their town the same, but the surroundings and the settings. And so they're having all the same, fights and challenges that every place has that has development. And so they're fighting about that. And people started talking about, the NIMBY, people say they shouldn't do these things. And I would just say NIMBY just means you've been there. It's your place. It's where you're attached. And if you don't care about it and you aren't willing to fight for your own backyard and preserve your own backyard, then it doesn't mean anything to you. Why should it mean something to someone else? And so this idea of preserving the unique character, because it is a part of our identity and our heritage, is essential, and it's the inspiration to why we might do this. These are communities that have made a big investment in those ways: Butte, Anaconda, Grand Union, and Fort Benton, Phillipsburg. And then the two geotourism areas that we have in Montana, the Crown of the Continent and the Greater Yellowstone area. These are local people who care about their place, and they're hoping to preserve it through economic development and heritage tourism. Heritage tourism benefits communities. The increase in travel to historic sites resulting from the preservation movement has been an economic benefit for the country that has exceeded all expectations. There's a lot of wonderful statistics out there. These are drawn right from the website for our Montana Governor's Office of Economic Development. Tourism is our fastest growing industry, $1.8 billion go into our local economies each year, and that's second only to agriculture, which is just a little bit ahead of that at $2 billion. Supports 37,000 jobs, or 7% of the total workforce. And in 2009 alone, we hosted more than 9 million visitors. So that's 10 visitors for each Montana resident, and that can equate to millions more customers for our Main Street businesses. This is just another look at, kind of the increasing ability of travel and tourism to help fund communities. These graphs start at 1999 and they go through 2007 from the U.S. Travel Association, but showing on each level expenditures, employment, tax receipts, and payroll, a consistently increasing graph that reflects the potential of travel. Now, this cuts off at 2007, so of course there's a dip, I'm sure, 2008, 2009, but that has all resurged in a lot of ways, and they've seen, for example, the national parks, the greatest visitation this summer of all. Heritage tourism is also a keystone in downtown revitalization, and I think that it was impressive to see in San Luis and in other communities like Phillipsburg, Butte, Anaconda, where there has been a really successful kind of tourism development program that it's a shared vision, that people really aren't fighting about going in different directions. They're really sort of pulling all in the same direction. And that really is a critical piece, I believe, that kind of collaborative vision that a community can hold together, because in order to create the experience, to steer the investment downtown, use the limited dollars that might be available to build over the years in terms of infrastructure and opportunities, venue enhancement, things like that, having that, holding that vision together as a community is really, really important. This is an issue of the Main Street Journal that was about revitalizing Main Street. It's out. It's been out for about a year. There's a really good chapter in this by Amy Webb on heritage tourism. Oh, and by the way, the National Trust for Historic Preservation pioneered the Main Street program. There are now 40 states that have Main Street. It started back in the 1970s. They have Main Street people on their staff. They also have a new program for the last couple of years on heritage tourism. They have something called Gozaic, and you can Google on that, but it's they've turned their new emphasis toward the heritage tourism development side that continues to steer and feed and fuel enhanced Main Street development and protection of historic properties. Heritage and cultural travelers, I think Cyndy did a lot of this. 81% of adult travelers include these things on their trip. Cultural heritage travelers stay longer, almost double if you note the statistics there. Cultural heritage travelers spend more, and the more opportunities they have to do things that are meaningful, unique, the more they will stay and come back. I think I was thinking while I was listening to Cyndy earlier, I can think of places, and it would be kind of cool at the end if you might like to do this, but just to list out those places that are so unique. When you think of all the trips that you've ever done, what are the things that really stand out? And in my mind, the things that stand out are things like the coral castles down in Florida, where that guy just kept building things out of coral forever, and you can't see that anywhere else. It was just one man's vision. Or the folk festival in Butte, another one where you can only have that experience going to Uptown Butte and seeing those performers against the backdrops of the mine yards. It was just incredibly unique. And so those kinds of things stick in people's minds, and they will return, and they'll tell their friends, and at the same time, all the people who live there will have their own lives enriched by those things as well. 5 principles for successfully sustaining cultural heritage tourism is the first one I mentioned, collaboration. It's just critical. The second one is finding the fit between the community and tourism so that it's a good, the suit fits well and the hand goes in the glove, and the program that you develop for the community is the thing that's the extension of who the community is. And you can't sustain something if it's a bad fit. You might be able to float it for a while, but in the end it won't happen long term. So getting that good fit so it will continue on and live into the future is important. Making the sites and programs come alive, making them relevant. We talk a lot about what younger people are looking for right now. Sustainability, the ability to go to a place and maybe download on your iPod or have a sound tour or something that really enhances the experience. That's how you make something come alive. Focusing on quality and authenticity and building on that as your base, and preserving and protecting the resources that are there, because those are your attributes. Those are things you don't have to go out and reconstruct or develop. You've got them, so make the most of them. Finding that fit is so essential. It balances the needs of visitors and residents. And in some places, and sometimes it is really important to keep the visitor's experience and the residents' privacy or their experience in a good balance. Every community has a different capacity for tourism, and so it's important to know what that capacity is and involve the community in shaping the effort. So really bring everybody to the table. Don't leave people out. Make sure that you all have a good consensus, and then you move with it. What are some barriers? Well, of course, here we have a little bit of different scenario than San Luis or Asheville, North Carolina, or any of these other places that are farther away from us. And one of the biggest ones is distances in between. That space in between, that time it takes to travel, the fact that once you get to the next population spot, it still might be pretty small, and it might be seasonal. That seasonality of businesses and events is important. Diverse new revenue is often needed to get something off the ground. A lot of the artists or the venue operators are avocational. They love it, they want to do it, but they may not have the greatest business skills, or they may need some support to build the capacity to do those things. Need for infrastructure, public restrooms, that's always a really important one. Places to eat, good lodgings within a certain a range of distance. Those are all things that are, kind of what people who plan tours look for in deciding whether it's a possibility to bring more people in. And last is the sustainability of the effort. That we work actually with a lot of endangered properties, and we'll have a friends group and we kind of build the friends group up to be able to keep things going for 5 or 10 or 15 years. But that idea of sustainability into the future is important because you're making an investment, or you're asking community to make an investment, or private investors to come in and help. And it needs to have some kind of a lifespan that goes out into the future, makes it worthwhile. So when we talk about collaboration, there's several ways to do it. One is within the community itself, and that's important, and I think that has to happen first and foremost. Then it's between the communities, and one way, you have to have a critical mass of experiences, and you need a critical mass of people and local capacity to make something happen. And so these heritage tourism corridors that have emerged in different parts of the country and in Montana are one way to do that. The people can collaborate on an idea for marketing and promotion that brings in a larger region, involves a bunch of communities and a lot of various local entrepreneurs and enterprises. And together, if they market and put themselves out there, it has more power and more drawing power than just individually. So the last one we just showed was the Hands of Harvest, which is that Golden Triangle area between Shelby and Havre and Great Falls. This is the Sage and Stone area, which is southwestern Montana, kind of radiates around Butte and Anaconda and takes in the Pintler Loop and Whitehall and Boulder, and then down into Dillon and the Red Rocks area. And these are two examples of heritage tourism corridors that have been developed and where people jointly market their uniqueness and jointly try to draw people into their region to spend time. The new area that we're working on this model right now is in the Bitterroot, and Joan and Cyndy and Philip are all here. And there was a really good workshop about a year and a half down in Hamilton that began to identify a lot of different venues and cultural activities that people could do. And the people have been in that program are continuing to work together, and now there's a move afoot to create a heritage guide. And that may look different now than it might have looked 15 years ago because the internet is so important, because people do so much more travel planning out ahead of time. The importance of getting your information out in that virtual realm is probably more important anymore than a published hand guide that people can take around. But both things have a place, and those things are being explored in this part of the state. So in addition to what happens right in the town or, kind of in the base of the community, there's also a lot of other kinds of heritage experiences that can be had in places surrounding towns. So for example, I was in Lewistown the other day, and we were doing research on the Nez Perce Trail, which isn't too far away. And we worked with a community called Danvers over the summer to restore their old church that they hope will become a tourism stopping place. And then there's a Charlie Russell choo-choo, which goes out into the area surrounding the town. So what I'm saying is that there are a lot of other kinds of experiences that can be had, especially for small town people who have just a limited number of things within the community, but in the surrounding area there may be a lot of other kinds of themes and places to develop for people to experience. Native American sites, our tribal communities, our tribal tourism program, and our tribal partners are just really essential to this kind of thing. They are very wonderful to work with, and there's a lot of really meaningful and very well-preserved places in Montana that relate to Native American heritage. The historic trails that go mostly east-west across the state can bring people from a variety of places, whether they're following the trail, whether they're buffs, or whether they just want to go and see part of it because they happen to land in Great Falls, or they happen to land in Three Forks and they want to see the headwaters and the interpretation of these really seminal places on the Lewis and Clark Trail. There's also the Lolo Trail, which comes right past Missoula here, and the Nez Perce Trail I mentioned in the Missouri Breaks area and starting in the west side of the state. Montana battlefields, these are really poignant, pristine, to the point of being able to step onto any one of these battle sites and really envision what it was like 150 years ago. And the interesting thing is that if you go to battle sites in other parts of this country, it's not that way. You go to the Civil War battlefields and they've protected a certain amount of acreage, and then all surrounding it are, shopping centers and neighborhoods. And I went to Cahokia, which is not a battle site, but it was an ancient settlement just outside of St. Louis, and it's amazing, a mound building community, and the setting has a beautiful, beautiful park. But the minute you step outside of the fence line of Cahokia, it's like urban development out there. So when people come here to see the landscape of our early contact sites and early settlement areas, they can imagine what it was like, and it's just a very powerful kind of thing. Heritage agriculture is another natural kind of thing to tie into in Montana. Butte Anaconda I mentioned already, but what they're doing with industrial resources and interpreting that mining experience and the way it transformed America and this world, electrification and copper mining is just incredible, and they're continuing to build on that all the time. It's really, since 1981, there's been a very conscious community effort to focus on the heritage of the town as one of the new recipes for development there, and it's really paid off. It's wonderful what's happening there. Geotourism, Cyndy just mentioned, and so I'm just going to skip over this, but basically there is a handbook out now that people can get a hold of, download off the internet, and that very long URL across the bottom of the screen, I don't ask you to all write it down, but I think if you just Google ITRR, Montana Tourism Research, you can follow it out, and they'll have a link to it on their website. But this is a really wonderful way to get a good set of working approaches to doing tourism in your community, and it gives all kinds of good links to people and technical assistance. It gives you step-by-step guidance on how to develop geotourism and marketing that would help you in that. The Montana Office of Tourism has been very engaged in this in a while, and Victor's here at the conference. You might talk with him if you're more interested in this. But it's really, really helpful stuff, and it's been developed. The two areas that have been developed so far, the Crown of the Continent and Greater Yellowstone, are just outstanding. It's drawing lots of people. Once you get people in through these avenues, then the challenge is on how do you then pull them a little farther away to come and see the rest of Montana and what's beautiful and impressive here. This is a new project underway. It's a 4-state project that's just in the discussion stages, but between Billings, Medora, Rapid City, and Cody, Wyoming, there is a huge area with all kinds of Western heritage and a number of Native American tribes, a number of communities that have a legacy of farming and ranching, and then there are the battlefields and a pictograph cave, and it's just an endless list almost. And they're trying to do a heritage tourism area across state boundaries, and it could be a wonderful thing if that gets going. And so that's all I want to say, but we wanted to leave time for discussion because I think a lot of people in this room are already doing some of this kind of thing, making these efforts, and there are a lot of programs, there's a lot of funding out there, you know, there's a lot of perhaps opportunity to partner even together within this room alone or in this conference, people that have some similar goals. And so I'd like to end it there and then just open the discussion. Cyndy and I would be happy to talk with you about questions and ideas for what we might do from here.
And you have about 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
This is a facilitating question.
I have a question about the impending aging of our state's population. I read these astonishing statistics. By the time it's 2025, we'll be third or fourth in the nation in terms of the number of people over 65 years old. And I know that we have to pay attention to needs and expectations of that group. And I'm wondering if in the studies that you guys have been involved in and with ITRR, has there been an effort now to ask the 65-year-old or older tourists what their short list is? Like, are they going to not want to come to Montana because they don't know if they can find health care or health services if they need it on vacations or anything like that?
I'm not familiar with it. If somebody is doing that, I'd be interested to know. It's a great question.
So, I can maybe help on that. Obviously with the economy, it used to be a year or 2 years ago, everybody was like, baby boomers, baby boomers have all this disposable income, and that's what you want to draw. Well, they don't anymore, because now they're worried about the retirement funds that tanked. And so what you've got is a lot of studies that have been done in the past 3 years or so, that the numbers don't really accurately reflect what's going to happen now, because the dynamics, the economics of that baby boom has changed so dramatically. So there aren't any studies that accurately reflect that. That's the bottom line. They're working on them, but it obviously caught everybody off guard.
I think too, if some of you were in the session this morning where they were talking about planning and zoning and how to really develop your core downtown so that, I believe what he was saying was that people are moving more back into the downtown areas, and that now we're looking for amenities that are easy for people to access when they live downtown. Grocery shopping, healthcare, all of those kinds of things. And I would say that when the visitor comes, they're wanting to be able to take part in walking and exploring your downtown and having those same kinds of amenities available to them. So I think they probably go hand in hand when you think about it. But I'm not aware of any studies that have come up either. But I think it's a really good and very interesting question that we should be thinking about as we look to, develop our downtowns and look to see how are we actually getting the message to those folks, those baby boomers, and are we giving them what they're looking for as they begin to travel? Because as you know, they're not taking bus tours anymore. I mean, that's kind of a way of the past, everybody getting on a big bus and heading out to see the Black Hills. You know, we're talking about much more independent travelers now. Travelers like me and you that have grown up with this independence and want to continue to do so at our own pace and see things, but we're going to need a little help probably. So it's a good question, Cyndy. I don't have the answer, but I think it's something we should be thinking about as we think more about travel in the future. Anybody else have any questions? Or
We have to make sure every town has a big urgent care center.
Accessibility is going to become a bigger factor.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of our stuff is natural, and how to be incorporating the accessibility with what is also natural at the same time. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge on these trails and some of the other things.
Right. That's a good point. How do you make the things that we are really known for and why people are coming here today, how do you continue to make those accessible to that generation that continues to want to see them and go out and experience them, but may have a little trouble walking, you know, a mile or two. Just, you know, I was just at Yellowstone last weekend. You guys would not believe how many people are in Yellowstone. I mean, it was like summertime. But my point was, you know, I used to trot down to Morning Glory. Like, actually, when I worked in Yellowstone, I would run down to Morning Glory and run it back. It's about a mile, you know, and that's a little bit of a hike to get down to Morning Glory from Old Faithful. You're walking all the way down, you're walking all the way back. And I was starting to think about that too, and maybe rickshaws are the answer there. I don't know. but I think you raise a really good point, and probably something we haven't thought enough about and need to think a little bit more about it.
Well, and what made it click was thinking about the concept of distances in between. Those are fearless things for younger people, but the over 65 group, that distance in between is going to be fraught with challenges. They have to figure out what's waiting for them, how can they get there, what happens if something occurs in that in between.
Yeah.
In our state, it's mostly in betweens.
Yeah, it's a lot of in-betweens. Anybody else? Questions, comments, jokes? Ellie?
Question for you, is it Chere?
Chere.
How exactly are you funded?
Well, we are a nonprofit,
Okay.
and so
You guys get a lot of grant dollars.
we do, yes, we have grant funds, we have donors, we have members, and love everyone here to consider being a donor or a member to MPA, and you can do that online. We have a website. But it's a pretty diverse kind of funding that we do. We have had a lot of public grants that were for specific projects. We do a lot of cooperative work with the National Park Service, for example. We've done a project with the Montana Department of Commerce and the Main Street Program, helping with some of the outreach. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Well, thank you all for coming
Yeah,
and
thank
for
you very much.
your interest in heritage and cultural tourism.